What is up, everybody? It's Dr. Vibe here, host and producer of the award-winning Dr. Vibe Show, the home of Epic Conversations, and I'm the host of Epic Conversations, 2020 Best Podcast News Award winner, 2018 Innovation Award winner given out by the Canadian Ethnic Media Association. I also co-host and co-produce the only online show in the world for dads and fathers that is sponsored by Dove Men Plus Care, and being part of that collaboration in 2022 and 2021. Part of a team that reached out directly and indirectly to over 100,000 fathers around the world. As always, I like to say you're blessed, highly favored, a magnet for miracles, and a solution for someone's problem. We're broadcasting live on April 2nd. Yes, it's a new month. It is a new month. Where did the first 3 months go? My goodness, they're just flying, but we're still here. Black Canada Talking. If you don't know about Black Canada Talking, or if you do know about Black Canada Talking, it's a live online event that provides Black Canadians the opportunity to give their takes and POVs on stories that are of importance to them. And we have another new friend. I just met this gentleman recently through some other people at an organization called Foodpreneur Labs that do great stuff helping BIPOC women in Canada get their food from kitchen to shelf. And had an opportunity to have a conversation live a few weeks ago with this gentleman. And then we were at an event together. It was actually another Foodpreneur event. They're celebrating their graduates of their most recent cohort. And I said, you know, we got to get you on by yourself. So we got him. So let me do the correct introduction. Our guest today is Chef Bashir Munye. He is part of the new generation of Toronto chefs who are inspired by global cuisine while creating the future of local and sustainable food ideas. A true global child, Chef Bashir's experience of food embraces many geographical and cultural boundaries. Born in Somalia and raised in Italy, he has called Toronto home for the last 22 years. Growing up in the Mediterranean, fresh seasonal foods was the norm. He continues this tradition through his farmers market operations, where he connects to the local farming and artisanal food business community. His approach to cooking is simple. He is a passionate advocate for promoting diverse food representatives of Toronto multicultural communities. He believes and advocates for access to good quality food for everyone. Currently, he's a culinary professor at George Brown College, but after we chat with him, you're going to like, I don't know where he's a professor, because he's always all around the place, but we are really happy to have him today. Welcome, Chef Bashir. How is up? How you doing?
I'm feeling blessed, and I'm feeling definitely highly favored. So thank you so very much for having me. I'm super, super excited to be here with you.
Good. Well, we talked before we went live. You don't slow down much, so I'm happy to get a few moments of your time, because it always seems like you're on tour, whether it's in Toronto or outside Toronto. You're always on the go. So we're really happy for you to take some time to share with our family today. And as always, when we have new friends come on, great bio about yourself, but let's take it back to the days of Somalia. Can you share about those early days of your journey?
Yeah, absolutely. Somalia is the place that I was born. We call Somalia is the land of poets. We are the furthest northern eastern corner of the continent of Africa. A beautiful continent, not a country, but 54 makeup people, 54 different countries. And Somalia, I have fond memories of being on the laps of my different grandmothers. And for us, grandmothers is like your great aunts as well. And I have fond memories of constantly being fed, rejoiced with a lot of love and care when there were a moment of peace. And although Somalia has been a little bit of unrest for the past 30 years, I'm feeling very hopeful and optimistic that things will get better. From there, I migrated in Italy. So I lived in Italy for about 13 years of my life. So hence this little funny accent. From there, I moved to the States. I lived in Virginia for a couple of years.
Wow.
Yeah, I lived in Alexandria, and you can imagine there was a bit of a culture shock coming from my Italian swag to find out further south some cowboys and horses. And I ran for my life to Toronto, and I've been here in Toronto for about 28 years. I have a lovely 24-year-old son that is actually graduating from TMU for aerospace program this month. And I have a 16-year-old girl that I love it dearly, but really made me pull all my hair. I'm sure you know one thing or two about being parenting. And here, Yes.
Yeah. Well, look, thank you for a little bit of that background. I want to touch about a few things that you just shared over the last few moments. What were some of the, what's the word I'm looking for? What are some of the core values that your family instilled in you that you still carry on with today?
I've always been taught about being a civil servant. My mother had aspiration for me to become a lawyer, a politician, or a diplomat. There's always been something around the moral integrity. We are, by nature, Somali people, predominantly 99% of the population are Muslim. So we've been thought about Islamic practices, which actually want to give it a shout out to every single person who's watching and perhaps are celebrating Ramadan. So I'm fasting right now. So there were some moral integrity, good character, being a civil servant. And I feel that although in my early teenage years, I was lost a little bit in the transition, I was privileged enough to find people that kind of regather me and regroup me and supported me and be the best version of myself. So there's been a lot of emotional groundness in my life, both from my mother. I wasn't raised by my father. Bless all the single mothers around the world that carry on families around, and also give a lot of love to all the fathers who are constantly dedicated and committed to show love to their own family as well. So those were some of the things that have really been installed in me, and now having my own son and having my own daughter, trying to bring the same values to them as well.
Excellent. You mentioned that you moved from Somalia to Italy. What age were you at that time, and why that move? And were you okay with that move?
When you are a child, you don't really have a lot of choices and saying. I was 5 year old. My parents, they had divorced, and my mother was a very an entrepreneur. One of those women who was a go-getter, and there was nothing that will stop her from becoming the best version of herself. And as you understand that in many countries around the world, and still nowadays here in North America, a lot of women, they have a very difficult time being the best version of themselves, because as men, we really benefit from a patriarchal culture. So my mother wanted to provide me a better opportunity. She took me to Italy, grew up in a boarding school. She allowed me to have a good education, which we're going to talk about later on about what's a good education. And from there on, I left Italy when I was about 19 years old.
And again, why did you leave Italy and you went to the US, which is another change?
Yeah, so I moved to Italy because my mother, she wanted me to be closer to her while she was doing an import and export with her father. And from there in 1999, when civil war started in Somalia, it became extremely difficult for her to provide care for me while she was also supporting a lot of her family members to escape from the civil war. So she had sent me to my great aunt, the woman that actually raised her, in Virginia, and I lived a couple of years with her, transitioning eventually to move to Toronto. So as I'm not sure if I told you, but Somali people, although, we are really nomads, so there is this constant movement and shift in our lives. And a lot of the cooking that I do nowadays is also called the nomadic comfort food. And I do a lot of studies around nomadism and the shift and the movement of people to constantly find better opportunities in life.
Nice. Well, I got my first real exposure to Somali culture a number of years ago. I worked in the area in Toronto of Weston Road and Lawrence Avenue. And that really gave me a great education and love of Somali culture. And I didn't say anything. I just listened. Watched, and learned, and just became a lover of that culture and the people of that culture. And I haven't been back there in a little while, but you're inspiring me to go back there, because there's some stores there that I hear are still there. I want to come in and just say, hey, how you doing? And just have those. Sometimes I would just go in a shop and sit down and we just talk.
You know what? There are a lot of similarities actually between Jamaican spirit and Somali spirit, and also Haitian spirit as well.
Yes.
When Jamaicans being the largest community of blacks during the 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s, when they migrated right here, post the 80s, every single other black person was always thought that it was a Jamaican person, because it was the predominant largest community. And a lot of Jamaican people always had like a bad rap. because of a colonial imposition and so forth. And so were Somali people. And the thing about it, the Somali spirit and Jamaican spirit is fire. Exactly the same.
I want to ask, Chef, I need to interrupt. You use the word spirit. Why? Because many people would say culture, but you use spirit. Why do you use that word? I find this fascinating.
Somali people, we are orators by culture. Until 1962, we didn't really have a history of written history of our own. Because of a colonial imposition, we had to give up on our own oral history. So when we speak through metaphors. We speak through an orating way to understand that above and beyond our physical, there is also our spirit inside. So the spirit is something that is like for other people to feel your energy as well. And I feel the vibrancy and excitement of Jamaican people as well. That's why I deferred as a spirit and not just as a normal way to address it.
I love that. I may need to borrow that, not stealing it from you, but borrow for that in future conversations. So with all this traveling, where did cooking start? Where did that start?
Yeah, I went again for 2 years initially for political science, as my mother wishes for me to
say. Yeah, that's what I graduated in. This is hilarious. Okay, go on.
And it wasn't really for me. I feel because I have a different kind of a ADHD, and I have this inability to stay still and put in a room, in a cubicle. It wasn't really for me. And in 1996, my cousin asked me to join a training program at the YMCA, and it was a love at first sight. There was something that cooking was allowing me to be and feel that other jobs were not allowing me to be. And I feel because I was also somewhat lost and a little bit, I would say the word lost in the transition coming from the States to here. I found a sense of a belonging, and I was able to use every single sense in my body, from the smell, the touch, the visual. There was a camaraderie, and there is an energy. There is this energy that you feel when you're in the kitchen cooking, but there is also a lot of a joy that cooks give you, but also there is a lot of emotional, there is an emotional gap that I feel that a lot of chefs have, and there is this constant need of wanting to please and making people feel welcome. And cooking for me has always been that act of love. So I feel that maybe perhaps because I didn't have my parents close to me at heart, cooking for somebody else was that opportunity for me to give my love in a different way.
Nice. What would you say in the early days was your first big cooking opportunity?
In my early days, I worked in a lot of really beautiful boutique hotels, such as the Windsor Motel. I worked above the Westin when it was called the Tula.
But okay, so hold on a second. How did you get into these places? Like there's got to be, like, you're talking, and this is early in your career. How did you get in?
I was blessed that I was talented, and I feel that perhaps also the fact that I speak, Somali. I mean, the fact that I speak Italian and then Somali as well. It was an entry point because I'm bilingual, and I feel that I'm quite relaxed as a person. But I will also say that I worked really hard. Nothing was really given to me, but I feel that the fact that I have this dual lifestyle, that I lived both in Italy and lived in the States and being in Toronto, really allowed me to be a talented cook, because I was able to find this intersectionality between European food, Canadian flair, and slowly trying to find myself. I also went to Joe Brown College in 2000 for 2 years for culinary management. After that, I had worked for 3 years. And, my mother always installed on me, like, you have to go further, you have to go further. So yeah, I started cooking, and I had my first experience in a lot of beautiful restaurants. I slowly worked my way through, and I was appointed to be a chef in a couple of really nice restaurants. And then that's where my path in my career started, and now it's constantly evolving. For some reason, I lost your mute. Sorry.
What was your first big chef job?
My first big chef job was this restaurant called Mercato on Bay Street. They own 3 or 4 locations across Toronto.
Yeah.
And that was my first job, not only as an executive chef, but also as a consultant. I was fairly young, and being young and being black and managing an Italian restaurant in the heart of the financial district. It was one of my first milestones for my culinary career.
Wow. How we'll get to what things are like now, but how was it back then? Did you see many faces that looked like you?
No, the only faces, they were more brown people than actually black people. Predominantly in the early 2000s, the backbone of a lot of restaurants were Sri Lankan people for the back kitchen, and Bengali people for more like a steward and a hostess and food runners and busboys. But nobody really looked like me in the kitchen. And I can give you a long list of experiences of the racism and prejudice that I have experienced. But also there is a culture that is very toxic within the restaurant industry, where I participate and I contributed for a lot of misogynistic behavior, homophobic toward it, because that's really the culture of the kitchen. When you think about the kitchen, it's been designed by this person called Auguste Escoffier, and it was designed like the army. So if you have attended the army, you know, the language that they use, the misogynistic behavior toward women, it's really what the kitchen is all about. And then now I've actually done my master in university at York University, specifically focusing on how to decolonize the table and how to really confront this form of oppressions.
Especially in your younger days, how did you overcome the workplaces that were, for lack of a word, toxic?
You know, I did a conference on Wednesday around my module around decolonizing the table. And colonization, it's both a geographical space, but also a mental space. And I feel that throughout my early childhood, the mental colonization has been imposed in me. So therefore, a lot of a direct racism you would notice, but a lot of the microaggression, you wouldn't really understand it on how it is perpetuated by white privilege and white superiority, you know, and whiteness. So you're trying to come up with different reasons and excuses to justify microaggression. But when it comes about direct oppression, if I can give you the long list of restaurants that I left after 1 day, 2 days, 3 days,
You're kidding.
Oh yeah, I told you, Somali people and Jamaican people, we have a similar spirit. I really didn't accept any nonsense toward me. Perhaps maybe I never really had courage at a younger age for me to take a stand for things that perhaps were happening to other people indirectly, because I was a somewhat light guy. But I feel that mental colonization allowed me to navigate it to both worlds as well. But when it comes about direct ignorance, when my wife met me at the very beginning, she was like, why aren't you able to keep a job longer? I swear I am able, but when people in the kitchen, they're constantly racist, they're like so prejudiced towards you, or the owners, they don't give you your money in time, and you have a family you have to care for, you cannot really stick around, So that kind of a behavior, I wasn't able to tolerate it, but I never really understood how deep was mental colonization and acceptance of microaggressions.
I get from you that you're very, and I say this as a compliment, very principled individual. Where did you get that from?
I grew up in a boarding school with nuns, so I would love to give all the credit to my parents and my community, but I think the nun kept me quite straight and narrow. In the boarding school, we had to study theology as well. So I think many religions around have different forms of the principles and morals and integrity, and being very caring for community as well. And I feel that principles, every now and then in my early age, I was kind of navigating them too. But I feel nowadays I have a bit more ground around my morals, my principles, and my integrity as well as a person.
That's wonderful. That's really good. We're here on Black Canada Talking, hanging out with Chef Bashir There is so much, and I know we're not going to cover everything today. It's not going to happen, and I'm glad we're not, because that means he's going to have to come back. But again, before we went on live, he told me what's up next in his journey. I go, when am I going to see you again? Like, whether it's, I don't even know if I'll be able to see him on screen, but there is his website. If you want to go check out everything about him, and I tell you, it will not be a waste of time. Not be a waste of time. There's his lovely looking website. A lot of beautiful. Is that your okay? You know what? I want to hear about this. There's the thing about a letter to my daughter. How special is your daughter in your journey?
So my daughter's name is Lula, and it's after my mother. My mother's name was Lul, and she's very special to me. My son is lovely, but I think I have a really soft spot for her. You know, when after my mother passed away about 12 years ago, I was kind of like really mourning quite a lot. I was like sad and I was mourning. And I was sleeping one night, and I was calling my mother. I was calling my mother. I couldn't find her, you know, and I couldn't find her in my dreams. I was looking for her, and out of nowhere, as I'm calling my mother, my daughter came right with me, and she's not, and she hugged me, and I felt so frightened. But I then understood that my mother's spirit was my daughter. And when I look at her, the things that she says, the things that she does, sometimes I'm feel like puzzled. How are you, such an old soul, you know? And so she's really, really special to me. And the letter to her was also to my son. I'm not only doing that because my daughter for many years, so she actually really sleeps in home because I'll be working all day long. By the time that I come home, to be sleeping. By the time I'm sleeping, I will be going to work. The letter was to ask her someone for forgiveness, but also for her to understand that I am things that I've done in order for me to be her father.
Wow, it's a great testimony. Great testimony. Which leads to, how do you, as much as possible, keep things in balance, because you're always on the go. You're a family man. You got two children, grown children, who still need their dad. How are you able to, as much as possible, manage all the different things you've got on going out there?
Yeah, you know, it's not easy, especially when you have like a very large extended family to support you. Um, I try to make time for them individually and let them know how much I love them, how much I care for them. The fact that my employability is what really allows me to support them for many of the after school programs for their educations and so forth. So I'm constantly working. I'm far from being the special, you know, super dad. But I think they came to embrace me and accept me for, you know, the effort that I've been putting as a father. And I feel that it's a constant work and growth as a parent. I'm trying to find a balance between doing my work and then having set committed time to them. So they know that when I'm spending time with them, it's unconditional time for them to feel that I care and I love for them and I want them to be the best version of themselves.
Wonderful. You do stuff for George Brown College. Was that something that you reached out to them, or did they pursue you?
You know, I actually had for many years, I actually had a stall at farmers markets, from the Brickworks, the Spring Grove Farmers Market. I did a lot of farmers market. I had a business called My Little Dumplings. And My Little Dumplings was the first of a culturally diverse dumplings using only organic flour and using local ingredients. I will have to do a TED talk to talk about the reasoning behind the business was wanting to use the local seasonal ingredients and also finding something culturally diverse. But when I look back, it was actually my yearning and my hunger to seek for acceptance, validation, and to showcase the value, the validity, and the significance of diverse community. Every dumpling, the outside shell might look different, but what really makes sense is what's the inside. So that was my metaphorical way of launching a business to really showcase the beauty about inclusivity. So that was my first launch in the business. And after that, when I opened a business a year and a half later, I had to close the shop. There was a big loss in my life, because you can imagine, from being a business owner and losing your business, I felt really, really sad. I felt quite depressed for a little bit. And then I've been always blessed. I had a lot of people that really love me and care for me and helped
Right.
me lift up and get up again. And then the doors opened up at George Brown College. I went and introduced myself. They knew about myself and the work that I was doing because of the farmers market and a couple of newspaper I was already in. And I did a test and I was able to work there. So I've been employed at George Brown College for the past 6 years now.
Wow. Am I right in saying that there's not too many melanated food educators in Canada?
Absolutely, you can. Actually, there is only one other brother at George Brown College that has been there for 8 years as a full-time faculty. That's the only Black person. I'm still on a part-time basis, which is okay with me because I have a very fulfilled life outside school as well. Yeah, you're 100% right. In the education places, specifically in higher education, there is a very few Black melanated people. But I feel that this past couple of years, through different DEI, I feel that a lot of organizations, they have to do more than just the minimum. And there are great opportunities for us in every single sector as well. And I feel that there is this Japanese saying that is about constant gentle pressure. And I feel that, by continuing to constantly put in this pressure, eventually a lot of the walls will break down and will give us the opportunities for what is actually right for us to be able to do.
What is your role in your collaboration with George Brown College?
So I'm a culinary professor, so I teach first and second year students. I also teach a lot of theoretical classes such as the sustainable chef and the slow food movement. My real dream, goal, and aspiration as a chef is actually to turn cooks to become agents of change. So more than just the joy of cooking for me, you have a moral responsibility to the land, the people, and working toward policy to ensure that there is a food sovereignty, there is food security, and working toward better and social justice space for everybody.
When it comes to food sovereignty, it seemed that became more and more an issue, pandemic and post pandemic. How did your, I guess, two-part question? Maybe I ask this first. How did your world change because of the pandemic?
So my world changed because I wasn't able to teach anymore. So you can imagine, when you're living with a family and you are the main source of income, there is a financial scarcity. I was always blessed and privileged enough to be marketable and finding other hustles on the side as well. So it did impact me financially, above and beyond the mental and the emotional way that it impacted everybody. But it was also a financial impact as well. So therefore, I wasn't able to eat and consume the same type of food that before I could perhaps splurge. But these 2 years, it also impacted me in a way that I developed an extra sense of empathy. That although that I've done a lot of work for marginalized community before, there was a gap specifically for many of my students. 64% of the students at George Brown College are international students, and many of them were actually stranded here in Canada. They were not able to go back, and they didn't really understand the judicial system and having to make choices between access to food and paying rent. So it impacted me, at heart, because many of my students, they really didn't understand how they were going to be able to navigate it. So I launched a program with George Brown College specifically through the support of a food share and the Black Creek Community Farm in creating food baskets. Actually, not myself creating, but asking for food share to create a food basket to support my immediate 27 students. So my students, every week, they will receive a basket for free coming
Wow.
from Food Share and for the Black Creek Community Farm, and then created a sense of awareness at George Brown College. And George Brown College, through the United Way, they were able to reflect about accessibility because they didn't really understand about how students were possibly experiencing hunger.
Wow. 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 So as you can tell, this man never, never, never stops. How has, from your lens, Black people been jarred because of this? Because now and the term we hear all the time is food sovereignty. How impactful has that become for people that look like you and I, especially?
I haven't told you earlier, but actually, you and I have a multiple friends and in the same community, and one of them is actually Kwame Williams.
Yes, 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 yes. Elder Kwame, yes.
Elder Kwame. So Elder Kwame, and and also brother, shall I say, elder brother Anan Lololi.
Yes.
They were like one of the many members of our community were constantly advocating for food security. Anan Lololi also, through the African Food
Yes.
Basket, had launched the first of a kind in Canada called the Black Food Sovereignty in Toronto, which is really an organization that focus on highlighting the need for Black people not only to have a land in consultation and in support with Indigenous people, because we cannot be seeking for our own sovereignty without really thinking about that we are on Indigenous land. So those were some of the principles around the Black food sovereignty in Toronto. And this whole conversation around Black food sovereignty in Toronto has been a wonderful, wonderful conversation that has been going around for 25 years. Perhaps we didn't have the language, and the city has not really been supportive of our needs. So we have done a lot of research, both in quantitative and qualitative research, to really understand what are the roots of it, which we know that the roots of this, it's primarily systemic poverty that has been designed through a colonial system. And then the inability for us to become financially sustainable. You cannot help and provide people with food, but without giving them the mechanism for them to become sustainable. They say, teach a man how to fish, right? So the Black food sovereignty in Toronto has been very important to me. I also sit on the Black food sovereignty as an advisor, and I feel very honored and privileged to see this shift and movement. And Brother Namloli has been giving the torch to a lot of young people.
That's beautiful. That is beautiful, because if there's something, one of the things that I get, we're not doing succession planning. So Brother Namloli, to hand the torch to the next group, that makes me pleased.
Absolutely.
That's very beautiful. Well, another venture that our friend is involved in is something called the Black Creek Community Farm. So why don't you tell us a little about that? I'm going to put the website on the screen. So do tell us about your involvement with that organization.
So last October, the Black Creek Community Farm had posted a job seeking for the value add coordinator. And I wasn't really sure if I wanted to work at the farm because, I'm not a farmer. How can I get a job working at the farm? And then when I actually read the job description, it really spoke to me. And I applied for the job. And the job for the value add coordinator, it's really this intersectionality with my work, both as a chef, former business owner, and also as a researcher. So my role as a value add coordinator is really the development of microeconomics through botanical research. Basically, I do studies around everything that is grown at the farm, and then I recommend the farmers and the organizations what are the seconds that we can use. So I give an example. Dr. Vibe, I know you love hot peppers. I'm sure you consume them fresh. I'm sure you have a variety of pepper sauce. But what does your family do with the pepper leaves?
We get rid of them. We don't. Yeah, they're just, that's it.
So if you think about it, that actually 30 to 40% of the plant, it's actually leaves. They get pruned and then they get discarded in the garbage or in the compost. Imagine how many cultures around the continent, from the continent of Africa, they're making chutneys. In Korea, they add them into their kimchi. In the Philippines, they add them into their soups. So my research really acknowledges that the plant as a whole not only can have a medicinal benefit for you, but there is a financial viability to that. So instead of discard them and throw them in the compost, why don't we make sauces and condiments where now members of our community have this sense of awareness and that they can create the microeconomics for themselves and for their own family as well. So going back with the conversation about the ability for Black people is not to be only food sovereign by getting land, but being able to also understand what does the land provide you. And the land provides you an abundance. So instead of throwing things because you don't know, our activity with a lot of my students is called the, hey chef, can I eat that? And chef, can I eat that is really allow you to look into the botanical studies of a plant and determine that, yes, the okra, we know that we can eat the fruits, but what do you do with the leaves with okra?
Wow.
People, they will throw it away. But you know what?
Yeah.
Jamaican people, which again, close to me at heart, a lot of Jamaican people back in the days, specifically to the Maroons and past generation down, they will take these pepper leaves, they might add coconut water, hot water, and then it will break down. And what happened? The okra, it's gelatinous. Some people call it slimy, and I don't like the word slimy. I'm a foodie. You cannot call it slimy.
Yes.
So the gelatin that it goes inside there is used to turn into a shampoo. That's one of the many things that understanding a plant, there is this such a viability. We eat raspberries and strawberries. What do you do with the leaves? You can dry them up and turn them into tea. So that's really my job. And my job is to really create sauces, condiments, and being able to sell them to members of the community and also into retail stores.
It seems that that's a whole new world being involved with Black Creek Farm. What things has that opened up for you that you weren't able to get exposed to before?
The Black Creek Community Farm, I feel that is a real gift for me. It allows me when I'm there in the morning, a peace of mind, first and foremost. I live in downtown Toronto and I'm in a concrete jungle. So just the gift of being there, opens plenty of door for me because it really allows me to be connected to nature. And I feel that our spirit, going back with the conversation of using that word, our spirit has to be connected to the land. When you walk on the soil, when you touch the soil, there is a connection, you feel the vibration. And the fact that the Black Creek Community Farm is the largest urban farm in Canada. So we are the largest farm in the city, and we are across Canada. And there are many members of the community that look like me. So being able to see farmers that look like me, that they grow food that is culturally appropriate to me, it really opens a lot of opportunities, but also gives me an opportunity to learn so much from them. So as much as oftentimes they see me as the person that is giving so much of a knowledge, they don't know that I'm actually the biggest beneficient of all of their expertise.
It's interesting how a few moments ago you talked about the land, and a few weeks before everything shut down because the pandemic, had the blessing and privilege to travel to Yellowknife. And they used the indigenous community. Like, one of the things that stuck out in my mind, I never forget, in almost every conversation, the land. It just resonated how you said about, the land, that the similarities between indigenous culture and Black culture, about the importance, the foundation is the land.
I feel that as the urbanized people, we are so disconnected from the land. But if you look at 3 generations back, it was all around the land. And before colonial imposition and imperialism and this beast of a capitalism, our people really thrived on the land. We had ceremonies on the land. The land was what was and still is our main sustenance. The way we made a living out of it, it wasn't all these industries and factories and so forth. So the land is where we came from. That's what really sustains us, And for different people, the land can mean something wonderful, but oftentimes for the history for a lot of African Americans, African Caribbeans, and African Canadians, the land and farming agriculture is a very painful history. Understanding the history of enslavement of a lot of our members of our community. So there is a total disconnection, but there is this young community of Black urban farmers and urban growers that it gives me so much joy, because they're reconnecting to the land. So again, going back in regards of like continuing the torch and allowing these young people to create this new wave of urban farming or urban growers, it's something especially really, really beautiful.
I feel that I'm talking to a global ambassador. Am I wrong? Do you feel bad when I refer to you in that way?
I don't know if I feel wrong. I feel humbled about it to be seen. As I was sharing with you earlier, I'm gonna be going to work in India for 7 weeks. So, as a culinary professor at Joe Brown College, we have a partnership with the University of Chikara, which is like a furthest northern regions of India, almost borderline with Tibet. and I'll be there working for 7 weeks. And I'm like, wait a moment, you're gonna pay me to go there? I was like, to learn? Sign me up. I don't care. Sign me up. Sign me up. So I'm really, really excited to go there and share my own knowledge and expertise as a professor, because a lot of those Indian students in the business program, they are looking to learn from someone that has a very European culinary knowledge, because that they come into a North American approach. But I feel that is the biggest gift for me, again, for being able to learn about their culture, their food, and everything special around Indian culture and people.
When it comes to Blacks, Africans, and food, where are your concerns as we're chatting today? What are you concerned about or with when it comes to our people and food?
I feel that colonization has really dispossessed us, and we're losing the ability to understand how vibrant our continent is, our people, our food. And my goal and objective is really, actually, I think I mentioned to you last time, I'm designing the first of a kind in Canada for a multi-ethnic African course that being taught in a culinary institution. This is the first of a kind. And if you really think about it, the disparity in education when it comes about why is it a continent with 54 countries, the main continent that is one of the richest countries in the world. I mean, one of the richest continents. Think about it. We still don't have a education that really speaks about our own experience and our contribution, again, around society. So I feel my major worries and concern that oftentimes through colonization, we are really indoctrinated in embracing a whole Eurocentric food affair. And don't get me wrong, I love that kind of ethnic food, but there is so much more vibrancy around our own food. And we needed more people within our own community, not only to lead this conversation, but also gather our own community to celebrations specifically around multi-ethnic African cuisine. Dr. Vibe, I watched a few of your shows. I was actually watching you a couple of days ago on Instagram as well, and I feel that I learned so much from you all the time. And,
just humble. I receive that, but I learned from you. It's we co-create together. We learn. We work together to win together.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. So I feel that your platform is one of those spaces that really allows Black people to share our own knowledge and our own expertise, but also having the opportunity to learn from many members of our own community.
Yeah.
As much, I'm a bit worried and concerned right now, but I'm starting to see a lot of a social media platform where there are a lot of young chefs, specifically coming also with to foodpreneur, where
Yes.
the reappropriation of our own culture is really meaningful. And my own thing is just because I have some critical lens that I'm looking a little bit deeper, but I'm supporting in the growth to be organic at this moment right now. But education specifically focusing on multi-ethnic African community, it's imperative for us in order for us to be able to maintain our own diversity of cultures.
What percentage of your life is educating, and what percentage of your life is listening and learning?
I have to remind myself, often to be a better listener. By nature, 70% of the time I'm speaking because as an educator, as a business person, and so forth. But I feel that I'm working to be a better listener. Sometimes when you have a particular privilege, which is the privilege of being able to share, you lose in that, by having that privilege, you lose in the opportunity to be a better listener. So that's something that I'm really working on.
No problem. Thank you for the honesty. You mentioned about young chefs these days. What excites you about our future when it comes to Blacks and young Blacks and the culinary world?
Yeah, there's a lot of excitement. Our first day on our first day, kind of the top chef, we had a young Jamaican chef. His name is
Trey. Yeah,
and he's a lovely guy. And one of his mandate is actually to inspire young Black chefs to join the culinary world as well. We had a health conversations. We had a different disagreement because I'm a bit older than him, and I was blessed enough to have many people to really pave the road for me to learn around my own community and culture. And Trey is one of those young chefs that is modest and humble to also listen. And I feel that it can be an inspiration for a lot of young upcoming chefs. But what I'm really trying to convert a lot of the chefs is to think outside the Eurocentric way of cooking, and using terminology and cooking food that is really close to our own DNA. See, there is a difference between cultural food identity and ancestral food identity. Cultural food identity for me, it's Italian and Mediterranean food, because culturally, I've been brought up eating that food. Mm-hmm. But in my DNA, it is my ancestral food, which is okra and cardamom and cumin and ginger and turmeric. So in my DNA, my gene pool is holding to what my ancestor ate for hundreds and hundreds of years. But through the shiftment and movement of people, it becomes a cultural food. So now a lot of Jamaican chefs, maybe Caribbean chefs or African Americans, they will cook cultural food with the inspirations of their own ancestral identity. So Trey is one of those examples of chefs. So my goal for them is like, while you are experiencing and exploring your identity as a chef, take in consideration that you are coming from somewhere that is definitely worth it to celebrate and to showcase the vibrancy of our own food and our own richness in history and culture as well.
Earlier on in our conversation that you were talking about when you were younger, and you're still young, I'd say you're younger, a lot of the restaurant environments were toxic. Are you still hearing a lot of that these days from other chefs, Black chefs, that it's still a toxic environment?
Absolutely. Things haven't really changed. And when we think, sometimes we forget that, Toronto, it's a special place. If you go outside Toronto about an hour from here, the experience of racialized people is totally different than here. In here, you will still experience a lot of racism, a lot of prejudice. And when you are a Black female, you experience even more, because now you have to put the gender analysis as well. Yeah. So in my education, say in school, we're really trying to focus on the race, class, and gender analysis through cooking. So when you are a cook, what are your responsibility? You know your rights as a man, but what are your responsibility? When you are a white person in my kitchen as well, you acknowledge your own particular privileges. What do you do with your privileges toward our kitchen as well? And when you are, and the list goes on and on. So for me, the system of colonization has really imposed, the system of patriarchal has really imposed the pain and suffering for a lot of a woman. And the systems of capitalism, it really take us all. So at the end of the day, we are all somewhat complicit and also participatory in capitalism. That really is what the root of many problems that all of us experiencing. Unfortunately, this system that has been built over hundreds and hundreds of years is going to take a long time to dismantle it, but I'm staying cautiously optimistic.
Nice. How often do you get to cook for yourself?
I cook for myself pretty much almost every day, and cooking for myself and cooking for other people as well. And during Ramadan, it's such a beautiful month because we do fasting from sunrise to sunset. So around 7:50, we break our fast. So already have a few things going on. But the best part is it's called the dua. It's a blessing when you're actually sharing a meal with somebody. The reason I showed you earlier the shirt, so I'm going to show you again.
Yes, let's do it again. Yes. Only animals and savages eat with their hands.
And you might say, why did you decide to wear that particular shirt? And you're talking about Ramadan. When I went to Italy, because we were talking about racism and the experience of racialized people, specifically for Black folks. When I went to Italy, my first meal, because I grew up eating with my hands, because many cultures around the world, we eat with the hands. Because eating with a fork, it's very counterintuitive to nature. Why would you want to put a metal in your mouth? It doesn't really make sense. You know what I mean? Maybe a lot of the cultures, they might use wooden utensils, but not metal, you know? So when you use in your hands, it's a way for you to connect it to your truth, your own experience, because this is your fingers. And your fingers, they actually hold a lot of good enzymes as well that helps you work through your gut as well. So when I went in the boarding school and I wanted to dig in and start to eat with my hands, the nun shouted at me in Italian, "Solamente animali e selvaggi mangiano con le mani." Only animals and savages eat with their hands. So you can only imagine the trauma of being almost 6-year-old and being told that only animals and savages eat with their hands. So therefore, my mother, my grandmother, my aunt, my father, my uncle, all these people, everyone in my community, we are animals and savages. So from that point on, until not many years ago, I never wanted to do anything with my own culture, with my own food ways, with my own identity. Because the stigma, the taboo, the shame, the demonizing of our own heritage, of our own identity, has been taken away from me. Therefore, for many years in my life, I've never wanted to have any interest at all in multi-ethnic African food, because through the lenses of the master and the colonizer, African food is something that savages eat. If you want a deer to be called the chef, you must know. So these words right here that I showed you right now, solamente animali selvaggi mangiano con le mani, only animals and savages eat with their hands, those words is really who shaped me to be the person that I am today, in the good, the bad, and the ugly.
Nope. Thank you for sharing that story. I want to just add get a little bit deeper in that. What turned that thought process around? When did that start to turn?
I will say there was a constant yearning, So the style of a food that I do is called a nomadic comfort food, which is a tribute to my own heritage as a Somali people, as we are nomads. We don't have a history of intense agricultural system. We care for our cattle. We consume more camel meat per capita than any other countries in the world. But the element of a nomadism is really rooted in the principle of a sustainability, because we can only carry with us what our camels can carry. Or we are not going to carry with us unnecessary things just built on capitalism and consumerism. And the principle and philosophy of people movement and constantly seeking for what is called the gu or the alabari, which is like the rain season, because the nomads, they go into the drought and then they're seeking for the rain season. But there is a methodology and reasoning. It's not like they're just like lost wandering around. There is this kind of like exoticism around nomadic people. And that really shaped my identity and my style of cooking. But I feel there is this constant yearning. I was cooking food and I couldn't really see myself in the make of the food that I was cooking, no matter how good I was. No matter how beautiful my sauce is and how perfect my vegetables are cooked, how perfect everything that I do, I've never really seen myself. There was always a void and there was a yearning for it. And earlier you said, you kind of remind me of like a Canadian version of a Marcus Samuelsson. He was one of the actual first people that actually really inspired me to seek deeper, because his journey and my journey, they're kind of similar.
Yes, because I don't watch a lot of television, but I'm a very big consumer of the Food Network, and some of the people on there, like Marcus Samuels, that always, I find it, like, I know a few seasons ago I was watching Top Chef Canada, and he was in town. I wish I would have known.
The similarities between him and I, it's actually he has been adopted from a white Swedish family during the 1970s, when there was starvation and hunger going on in Ethiopia. And he had totally lost, him and his sister, and then he had totally lost the connection with his father and his whole family. And many years later, as an adult, he went back home and found that his father was still alive. He had other family members as well. And that yearning, the void that he had, and no matter how good was his Scandinavian food, when he went back home and he found his father and his siblings and his own heritage, there was this awakening of senses. And he couldn't really look back. Similar to me, I grew up in Italy, totally disconnected from my own heritage and my own cultural identity. And then later on, slowly by slowly, seeing Marcus Samuelsson, But I feel here in Toronto, for me specifically, many years ago, one of the things that really triggered my joy was when I saw an lololi from the African food basket growing purple okra called Little Lucy. So there was a journey for me for like the past 15 years in really working toward the celebration of a multi-ethnic African cuisine and its people. But I feel that Marcus Samuelsson was one of the first pioneers when it comes about making modern urban African cuisine.
What's next for you?
Oh man, I'm trying to keep a few things on the hush, but
okay, then keep it quiet.
No. I have a fantastic agency that is supporting me. There's been a desire for me to eventually write down a food memoir around.
You are reading my alleged vibe, because this has to be documented somewhere. There's too much good stuff that's got to be documented somehow. Yes.
Yeah. So maybe a book, but that required financial viability, because my book it's rooted in the continent. So in order for me to do justice to a continent with 54 countries, it's going to require some financial ability. So if anybody out there who's looking to invest in me,
call you up.
Call me up. Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you.
Good. Well, Chef, thank you for everything you have done, are doing, and will be doing. I have richly enjoyed this conversation. I've learned so much and learned to appreciate not only you, but the people you've touched and the people you amplify.
I appreciate you having me here. I feel that I'm actually the biggest recipient of all the kindness of people that I touch their heart and their spirit and their being. I feel that earlier when you asked me, but I truly believe that I'm a lifetime student. And I feel such a privilege for me to be able to meet people and constantly learn everything from them. And I want to give you also big thanks to you for inviting me and creating a space.
Absolutely.
A space of generosity for us in our community as well.
Few quick things. First of all, I have one question, but it's in 3 parts. When it comes to food, what is your message to non-melanated people?
There are a couple of things. One of them will be adventurous. Do not stigmatize. Do not yuck my yum. Yeah. Don't yuck my yum.
Yeah.
You know?
Okay. Yeah.
And then the other one is like be very intentional with your appropriation. Therefore, do not appropriate. Anytime that you feel the need that you want to take someone from our culture, our own food, and you want to glorify it, you want to make it better, don't do that. Think about that our ancestors have been doing this. Think about your own privilege. Enjoy our food. Celebrate our food. Give a tribute to our food, but do not appropriate our own food.
Okay. What is your message for melanated individuals that are involved in the food?
Keep on keeping.
Okay, not short and sweet. And then finally, what about us melanated people that are foodies, who are consumers? What's your message to us?
Invest every single dollar to Black-owned businesses in every aspect of our life. For me, food as a language of love. There are a lot of fantastic Black-owned businesses. Support and go and look into the Black Creek Community Farm. Come and visit me at the Black Creek Community Farm.
That's going to happen before you leave, my friend. We're going to make this happen before you leave, big time.
Absolutely. And actually, I hosted a nomadic supper last year at the Black Creek Community Farm, which was the first of a kind Black. There were like 3 tiers of Black members of a community. Those ones who have the financial ability, those ones who are working in the grassroots organizations, and those ones who are in the hospitality.
Are you planning to do another one in the near future?
I would love to do another one.
Yeah, please. And if we can help promote it, please reach out. I'd love to not only be there, but also just want to support that. That is absolutely beautiful. Got some share night, says great conversation. I learned so much. Kudos to you, Chef, by being a trailblazer and such an inspiration. I'll be visiting the farm and grabbing seedlings, among other things.
Yes.
There you go. So before we let Chef go, this is how you can get in touch with them: website, Instagram, Facebook. Also, go by, whether it's at least digitally, but if you can, face-wise, to Black Creek Community Farm, because I'm going to be going out there. I may even do an Instagram live out there, because it seems when I do Instagram lives, people watch, but I am really excited to have an experience with Chef Bashir and all the wonderful people of Black Creek Farm. So, Chef, I will say in closing, make sure you give yourself grace and don't just manage your time, manage your energy.
Thank you very much for having me. This was an absolute pleasure. I'm looking forward to connect with you at the farm again. Thank you.
Absolutely. Take care. That was massive, family. Like, so much I learned. So much learned through that conversation. It was absolutely fantastic. So let's start, close it down. A few things. If you like what you see or heard, I'd love you to subscribe to the Dr. Vibe Show, preferably on YouTube. If you do it on YouTube, subscribe on YouTube and also hit the notification button. Like it on Facebook or wherever you're watching this conversation, live or on the replay. Subscribe. We appreciate that. Also, a few other things. Would you like to promote your business or service on our show? Contact me at dr@the drvibeshow.com. And if you want to just contact me in general, I guess there's more than one platform. A long time ago, someone called me Googleicious, but you can contact me through my website, thedrvibeshow.com. Email dr.vibe@thedrvibeshow.com. YouTube, Facebook, and LinkedIn, The Dr. Vibe Show. Twitter at drvibeshow. Just W. No .com. Twitter doesn't have a .com. No, please. And then finally, Instagram, the DRVIBESHOW, the DRVIBESHOW. And it's scrolling along the bottom here. If you're watching live on the replay, you can catch replays on the Dr. Vibe Show, YouTube, Facebook, and LinkedIn, and the website address. So as always, and also thank you to Share Knight for that comment. Appreciate that. That's fantastic. As we close out, this is what we do. Live your life as a dream. If you can dream it, you can make it. Sometimes you have to get small to get stronger. Block assumptions, then aim bigger, aim better, aim higher, aim wider. Love, faith, and respect. And remember to give yourselves grace and don't just manage your time, manage your energy. We'll see you next week on Black Canada Talking. And throughout the week, follow me, whether it's the Morning Vibe, Monday and Friday mornings, 9 a.m. Eastern Time with Ryan Knight, or Saturday or Sunday evenings, State of Things with Aisha, Jill, and Lala. God bless. Peace well. Keep the faith and walk good. Yeah. Listen.